I just want to make sure that we give you credit for that. This is fine. We don't need anything for that. We need it.
So this one that's the.
No,
Yes, that's the only checked as accepted. Okay. Does everyone have the contracts I sent them? Okay.
I have one.
Yep, it's a big packet. Okay, then online you should see me sharing a screen. Is the screen being shared?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. And then just remind me if I keep forgetting to scroll down because I'm going to talk about these areas. So what this is called the seller's packet. And basically it's all of the documents we need to take a listing in this market. Everything that's required from the company, and then we're going to go through those. The first one we're going to go through is this exclusive right to sell one. And we're going to talk about each section. And I'm going to give you some examples of how agents have screwed it up and how you can screw it up and how not to. And then also we're going to spend most of the time, if you look at this packet, it's probably, I mean, it's super thick. So online, you should have got this from Russ. He emailed it out yesterday. So you can pull it up there. But we're going to spend probably 80% of the time on the exclusive right to sell. And then we're going to spend the last like 20 minutes running through the other ones because they're not as in depth. Okay, if we screw up the first one, then the other ones are going to have a problem. It's not really hard to screw up the last ones, so we can go through it as quick as you guys want to. But ask all the questions now. This is where there's no stupid questions. Let's figure it out so that we don't make a mistake as we go, as we're filling this out. Okay, so let's start with the exclusive right to sell. First, well, actually,
if we bring a table over here.
yeah, that's fine. Here, let me grab it. You can use this one.
Thank you.
Yep. That works. You guys want one too? You want one?
I'm fine.
Okay. Okay. There's not a lot of writing, but we're going to talk about that. So real quick, just so I know where you guys are, how long have you guys been in the business?
Since April.
April,
September.
September,
About 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay, so you're probably the newest. Wait,
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yes.
So what day did you get your license?
I haven't gotten my license actually. They told me I could get it.
Okay, so you're probably the newest. Do you have your license?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're the winner. And then Alex, when did you get your license?
October of last year.
October last year. And then June? June. Okay. All
And
right.
then I just barely. Oh,
Who just got?
sorry, I'm in the computer. I just barely got mine on Monday. My license got on Monday.
Oh, nice. There we go. Okay, you got one more up on there that is welcome. This will be good for you and even for you, Alex, because you filled out how many listings have you taken? Or are you mostly buyers?
Mostly buyers, but I have 4.
4? Okay, so this might be some basic stuff for you, but there's some stuff in here that I think that you'll get some value out of.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're gonna kind of go through this. I'm gonna read some of it and we're gonna just kind of skim through some of it. So if I skim through it and you're like, let's talk a little bit more about it, we'll stop and we'll read through it. But I'm just gonna highlight some of the most important things. So if you look at this very top part, there's one thing that we want to make sure we are aware of is here at Century 21. Here you go. Here at Century 21, we have a full legal team that is here to help us and protect us. If you know what a lot of these contracts are, the UAR creates these contracts that protect the sellers, protect the buyers, but there's very little protection for us as agents if we're not disclosing things that we're supposed to. And there's sometimes we make mistakes. And so we have created some documents in Century 21 that disclose some of this stuff to our sellers and our buyers so that it protects us through the process. So if you choose to use the MLS forms and you sign a listing agreement, there's certain things in here that you will not, that it will not protect you. I'm going to point those out just so you're aware. So you're aware of those, but in dot loop, does everybody know how to find the contracts in dot loop? Okay, so in dot loop, just use the contracts for that. Especially this exclusive right to sell. There's specific things in here that the other contract doesn't have, and this will protect you and help you do your job at a better rate. Yes.
So what if someone in here doesn't know how to find stuff in dot loop?
There is a dot loop class, but the easiest way to do it is either talk to me afterwards or we can talk to Russ, YouTube.
Yeah, there's YouTube.
There is a
Few
class,
fresh people in here, so
yeah, it's
that's on. It was this Thursday, or is that next Tuesday? The dot loop.
probably next week. I don't
Next
remember.
Tuesday.
Yeah, I don't know when it's
Sometime
yet.
next week.
But it's a good one to go to because then you can find the documents. The problem is a lot of us go to the MLS and we find all the documents in the MLS, we use those. There's not a problem with that. It just doesn't protect us as well as what we've done here. And they've gone in and really given us some good protections. And when we go through it, you'll see that it is helpful with
And
that.
this is just for listings.
Today is just about listings. Yeah.
But, so I guess my question is, whether it's a listing that you have or you're working with a buyer and we want to use the Century 21 forms, but if you have an agent that sends you just another regular form.
So these are there's two of them specifically. It's the exclusive right to sell, which is the contract between you and the seller, and exclusive buyer broker, which is between you and the buyer. So no other
So
agents
it
can.
doesn't matter if an agent uses just an NAR form.
It's not going to pertain to you because you're thinking more on the REPC, like I'm going to write an offer, and we don't have a special REPC that we use. You can find that in MLS. It's just these two documents. Okay. Okay, so if you look at the top here, this agreement is entered in effective the blank day of blank 2021 by and between Century 21, the company, and blank the seller. Okay, so here's something that you've got to keep in mind. If you use the other form, this is a big difference. This talks about an effective date. What does effective date mean?
The day goes effective.
Okay, the day it goes effective. What if I want, my seller needs 2 weeks before it goes live on the MLS? What is that date going to be?
2 weeks minus 2 days, right? Because once you upload it, it takes 2 days to get on the MLS.
Okay,
Or can you just do today's date and then was an MLS exclusion form? Is that what it's called?
yeah, okay,
That's what I just did that. I was like, oh my god.
okay.
Like I should
So-
do that. So
Yeah, and that works too. The difference with that one is your listing actually does go active, and then your exclusion, you got an exclusion for that. This effective date, what you said, where in 2 weeks we put it, this is a big
Hi,
difference.
I didn't expect you.
This is a big difference between the normal exclusive right to sell and this contract. Is our effective date doesn't mean that the contract doesn't start. The other MLS one, the effective date would be the contract starts then. So if we use this is the example. My seller wants 2 weeks. Okay, I use this form and I put the date 2 weeks out. Somebody else finds my seller, they're at family dinner, which is usually what happens, and they say, oh, you should have used my friend. And then they come out and they say, oh, well, I have this agent, I need to use them, it's really important. And then they sign a listing agreement with
That's
them.
why I drove down.
Oh.
Our commute
Brilliant.
actually put on
All right,
real
guys,
pants.
If you're online, mute, please. Thank you. So if we're using our form, this form right here, the listing starts the day you sign it, which is the date they're going to sign, which would be today. And then it starts and effective 2 weeks from now. If you use the other form and you sign this date in 2 weeks, this doesn't start, this contract doesn't start for 2 weeks, which means if a friend came in the next 2 weeks, they could list the home and their listing agreement would be before your listing agreement and you would lose. Okay?
there's no kind of like protection at all on that. It's like, oh,
Not on that.
first, even if it's like 1 day before.
Mhm.
Oh, man.
And in fact, it even goes down to you signed it at 12 o'clock and this person signed it at 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock takes precedence. Okay, so in contracts, it's who did it first. Doesn't matter how fast it did it, it's just who did it first.
Or what date is first?
Or
Yeah,
what
what
date
date
is
is
first. So in this particular case, where it says the effective date needs to be, or just when the day you want it to go live. If you're using our form, it's effective right now. It's just, or it's active, it's an active listing right now. It's just not effective and doesn't start until 2 weeks.
So can you
Does that make sense?
go- Like, cause I just signed this yesterday.
Yep.
And then I did an MLS exclusion form and I checked that middle box.
Yep.
So what is happening? Like, what is,
So the
What's
middle
my
box says I'm
situation?
not gonna report it to the MLS.
is the first time I used the form, I think it was
Yeah.
like,
So it basically, what date did you put here?
last night. Somebody signed at like 7,
So you did last night's date,
yesterday.
and when is it gonna hit the MLS?
Probably tomorrow, maybe
Yeah, so you did it right. You were fine with that. What you could have done is you could have done the effective date on the 4th,
Wednesday or something.
and then you wouldn't have to do the exclusion.
Say,
Form.
say it's Thursday, am I in trouble?
No, because you signed the exclusion.
Excluded, okay.
Mhm.
So what is that specifically doing? It's just like the middle boxes we have, so like I have the listing, I'm saved,
Mhm.
and then it's just whenever I get it marketed, is that what it says?
Yeah, so the reason we're making a big deal of this is the MLS, there's this Clear Cooperation Act that just came about, and it basically is trying to mitigate agents taking listings, then not putting it on the MLS, and then going out and telling all of their friends and family and their office and their coworkers, hey, I got this listing. Then they come in and they purchase the listing, and then it hits the MLS and it's under contract. Like, I'm sure we've experienced that as buyers agents where we're like, we want to show a home, it's the perfect home for them, and you never even had a chance. Like, it's just, it wasn't available, right? It's because they were marketing it and they were exposing it to their office and everybody else. And then they finally got it to the market. So the state has come out and they said, okay, we don't want to have that unfair advantage. We want to make sure the sellers have all of the advantages that they've been given. Because what they're having is an agent would tell the seller, this is how we do it. And then they're maybe leaving money on the table because they didn't actually expose it to the whole market. If everybody knows about it and everybody gets a chance to write an offer, they're going to get the best price, right?
Right.
If I only tell, like, I have the best deal possible, but I only tell these two, and you guys don't know about it, and it's a really good deal, one of these guys buys it, but you didn't get a chance, is that fair?
No.
It's not fair. So that's what they're trying to eliminate. But we also have this problem where most sellers are, they're not ready, like day one of when you sit there and talk to them. Okay, let's list the property in 2 weeks. I gotta clean up the house. I gotta move some stuff out. That's right. So if we run into that scenario and we sign the listing, we have to get it live and active within 1 day. That's the Clear Cooperation. You have to have it on the MLS in 1 day. So how do we get away from that? This one, we can start the effective date in 2 weeks, but not necessarily our contract doesn't start. Our contract starts tonight. Effective date starts in 2 weeks.
So you put the date here,
Mhm.
like to say today. Okay, this is when I signed it with you today.
Okay, so if you did that, then when is your listing active?
Let's say it's gonna be active in 2 weeks,
Okay, so
Where
what
do I
date did
put
you
that?
put? What date did you put here?
today.
Okay, so your listing is active today.
Today.
So what you would do is you would put the date in 2 weeks
And then.
right there.
Okay,
And then on the back, when they sign it, it's today.
oh, okay.
Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so, and then this part right here says between Century 21, Everest, the company and the seller. This is one confusion that we get a lot. Who owns the listings and who owns the buyers in this market? The brokerage, okay? So what are we then as agents?
Representatives
of the brokerage.
Representatives of the brokerage. So you're the assigned agent for the brokerage, but the brokerage actually owns the listing and everything. So this agreement is actually between the brokerage and the client, not you and the client. Okay. and then you put the seller's name. And where do we find the seller's name? Where can you find the seller's name?
Driver's license, title.
A title report. Okay, why would the title report be the most important? Driver's license, everyone, well, not everyone has a driver's license, but why could that throw you off?
For the driver's license?
Yeah.
Oh, because maybe they don't spell out their full middle name or whatever.
Okay,
But-
so we're,
There could be more than one owner to the property.
there could be more than one owner of the property, but a driver's license doesn't say that you're the owner of the property, right?
It could be their trust.
It could be any trust, it could be anything, right?
So another, the same situation I'm dealing with right
Uh-huh.
now is, so on the loan for the property that I'm selling, it's the dad and the sister, but on title, according to the MLS, it's the mom and the dad. Does it matter who's on the loan or does it matter who's on title?
So are you representing the seller or the buyer?
The seller.
Okay, the seller. So that's a great question. Let me ask you guys real quick. Okay, I've got a dad and a daughter and a mom who's on, so the dad and mom are on title. And you got the dad and the daughter that are dealing with you, right?
Loan, yeah.
Okay, so who has to be signing for this
Whoever's on title.
title? Okay,
That's what I thought. He keeps coming like, oh, this, my sister's on the loan, and I'm like, as long as she's not on title, I think we're okay. But I mean, I'm double checking the title and like triple checking everything.
so because she's on there, title's gonna want, she's gonna have to sign papers too.
The
but-
sister,
Yeah, because they're getting payoffs for her loan and they're gonna have to do that too.
would that be?
I think it's weird that she's not on
bank
title, but she owns the loan though.
Yeah,
The whole thing is messed up.
yeah, and that's being like, it's my first listing and it's super weird and complicated
Yeah.
because like the son lives in the home, the mom and dad are on title and the sister's on the loan, and so I'm like, what? So yeah, I'm doing a title check to make sure who's on.
And
that,
that's the best
then-
way to do it. We do a title check to find out who's on there because unfortunately, this is where a lot of problems come in is somebody says, I have the right to sell the home. And the biggest one that we see is trusts. Okay, you have 4 people in a trust and there's one person who's wanting to sell it and you're talking to that one person. That one person says, I have the right of the trust and I have the authority in the trust to sign for the trust. Okay. Interesting thing with trust is sometimes it gives you permission to sign, but there's other things that are excluded. And a lot of times property is excluded. They have to have everybody sign for that one. You just have to get the trust papers in order to make that work. So this one, we've run into the problem. In fact, we had this just couple months ago where the husband and wife had been divorced and she was on title and their divorce decree said that he gets some of the money on that. So there was 2 documents that were linking it. Well, he refused to sell it and she refused, or she wanted to sell it. And we took the listing with just her signatures on it. And he wasn't even in the picture because he didn't know about it. So the agent didn't know about it. I'm not saying
Oh,
names.
sorry. Oops. Nobody heard that.
Okay, so what's the problem this can create? If I go through, let's just say I didn't catch it, okay? I signed the listing agreement, I signed it with the wife. I put it on the MLS, I get an offer, I get an accepted offer, I get 20,000 non-refundable earnest money upon acceptance. And what's the problem now that we have? Or is there a problem?
The biggest problem is, if it does go through, your seller owes them back, not just the 20,000, but additional 20,000 on top of it.
Yeah, okay, so who's defaulting? The seller is, right?
Question, so you said they did get a divorce, it's like officially they are divorced, but.
They got a divorce, but they're still so in her mind, they're off,
Yeah,
but they're not off. There's 2 people on title.
so what I'm understanding is like the decree said like, oh yeah, sure, so they're both on title, that's what I didn't know, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, she's on title, but he still has, like rights to the money.
Mhm.
And that's what I was thinking, it's like, sure, she could sell, but like then she's losing out a ton, she has to pay half or whatever
Yeah.
they come up with, but they are both on title.
They're both on title, but she didn't think so because they had divorced and so they were separate. So she's just like this, the court said this is my home and I have to give him money afterwards. So that's her belief is I'm the owner of the property, which normal person would think that that's what it is, right? So when they talk to the agent, they say, this is what we're doing. The agent goes, okay, sounds great, listing, oh yeah, I got this nice listing, we set it out there, now we get this offer. And we have $20,000 non-refundable acceptance offer. Now what happens?
Bad stuff.
For who?
The seller. This is why you do like a title.
Okay, so is it just the seller?
And the agent.
Right there. That's the one I want you to be careful of, because it's our responsibility to make sure that we have the right people on the contract, especially before we go under contract with a buyer. So my suggestion is when you take your listing, you get a title report ordered right away so that you can see who's on title before you accept another offer, before you accept an offer that comes in. Because what happens here is, okay, what happens if the husband or the ex-husband, if he refuses to sign?
Fully executed contract.
You don't have the right to sell the property, which means who's in default? The seller's in default, which means there's $20,000 on the line and the agent's on the line for not doing that. So do you see how that can be a problem? So we want to make sure that what we're doing is we're checking the title, saying these are the people on there. Now, if title messes up and we mess, and then we write something on there, then that protects us because we did our due diligence, right? So does that make sense? So that's where we find the seller. Any questions on that first section? Okay, terms of the listing. Okay, so the seller hereby grants the company including, and this is where you get inserted, the seller's agent. This is where it says the company grants, the seller and the company grants that you can be an agent in there. And then it comes down here where it's the listing period. This date right here, this is where it's going to end. So what's a good time frame for a listing? 6 months, year. Okay, what's the requirement for Century 21?
6 months.
Okay,
Is it?
are you guys just guessing?
Yeah.
Does anyone else know if there's a requirement?
Whenever he feels right.
There's not a, there's not official requirement from Century 21, but 6 months is where we would like to see you. So you'll hear in objection handling where we'll say 6 months is our company policy. It's not really a policy, but it's a good time to do it. But here's the interesting thing. What if you took a listing in October? Would you want a 6 month listing? Now let's go back to a normal market. Okay, this market, if you don't have it sold in the next 30 to 45 days, you probably have a problem. But let's go back to a normal market where homes do stay on the market for 6 months. Okay, you take a listing in October. Do you want a 6 month listing?
Probably 9 months.
Okay, why would you want a 9 month?
Well, because spring is when, like, that's a very popular season to buy. So you're gonna be completely missing spring. I mean, sign in October 1st, then April 1st is when it's over and you miss that.
And you missed that. Yeah. Okay. I learned this from a personal experience that I had. I took a listing up in Pepperwood area, up in Sandy. Okay. It's a nice high-end neighborhood, right? I took a 6 month listing. We took it in October. And from October to March, not one house sold in Pepperwood at all. They all sat on the market and nobody looked at the home. And obviously my sellers were frustrated. And it was 2 weeks before my listing expired. And the spring market started bringing buyers in and we started getting calls, lots of calls. Like, we want to go see it. We want to go see it. I want to go see it. So we started showing it a lot. And I could just see the momentum. We started seeing homes go under contract in the neighborhood. And I could totally see the momentum of, we're going to get this sold in the next 2 weeks. Okay. So I'm talking to the seller and I say, okay, I just need 2 more weeks. Let's extend it 2 weeks. I won't extend it for 6 months. Give me 2 more weeks and we'll have it sold. And his response to me was, I really wanted you to list the home. My wife wanted the other agent who I was competing with, and I won. So now it's her turn to take over the agent. So my listing expired and I had like 4 showings that weekend that expired. Okay. It expired. The next week, the agent who came in got it under contract and it sold in 35 days.
You don't have a protection period?
So we'll get to the protection period here next. And I'll explain why the protection period doesn't necessarily help us as much as we think it helps us. But no, I didn't have that. And he walked away with a, you know, a $20,000 paycheck 35 days later. And I walked away with a reputation from that seller that I didn't know what I was doing. So I learned that. So now if I take anything in October, I like to go out at least 9 months for that very reason.
It's like a year and a half.
A year and a half, right?
I did a year and a half, but I did that by accident. 'Cause I had
Yeah.
it expire at the end of December.
Uh-huh.
But December of 2022.
Hey, it take a listing for a really long time. The other ones is like if you're selling land. I wouldn't take a 6-month listing on a land. If you get a cabin property right now, I wouldn't suggest taking a 6-month listing on a cabin property.
Like 2 years or?
Yeah, like what would you recommend for land?
Well, if it's land that,
Rural.
yeah, rural, I'd go for sure a year and maybe a year and a half on that. So you want to make sure you give yourself enough time. Now, it's kind of a moot point right now. We're talking a lot about this right now, but the fact is property still sells and sells quickly. So if it's going to take you that long, there's an issue with the pricing of the property anyway. But we're going to get back to a normal market. Okay, any questions on that? This right here, there's a section right in the middle. This is what I want to make sure everyone understands. It says right here, where you write the address of the property, at the listing price and the terms stated on the attached property, multiple listing service data input form. Okay, so what's the data input form? That's the MLS sheet. Okay, so sometimes we'll take a listing and then we don't put it on the MLS because the seller says, well, we don't need it on the MLS and I have a buyer. Okay, so I can exclude it from the MLS. In our contract, it says we're going to include the data entry form. So if you take an ERS, this exclusive right to sell, you need the input form. And if you're not going to do the input form, you have to do an addendum to this saying it's not included. So this one is different than the MLS one where it's just the exclusive right to sell. This one includes the data form. Okay, any questions on section 1? Okay, number 2, brokerage fee. So this is where we get paid. So what needs to go in the percent section? What should go there?
Minimum
6,
of
7, or 8.
6, 7, or 8. Yeah. Okay. So we had a brand new agent in this office, and in Morning Ascent, sometimes we ask, you know, what's a win for the week, right? You guys have been asked that, right? What's your win? And he took a 3% listing
Sweet.
and offered 3% BIC.
Ooh, what a champ.
So he was super excited, but he didn't realize that he thought this was the fee for him. And so he put 3% here.
Oh, okay.
Where's his TC? Like, who the hell's
Right.
checking that?
Well, so we had to inform him that he was doing this transaction for free
Oh,
because he's giving all the money away. So that's one thing you got to keep in mind there. That is going to be whatever you're offering to as a BAC. So if you go down to the bottom section, it says BAC on the MLS, blank dollars or blank percent of acquisition price. And then we have in bold letters here, it says brokerage fees are not set by any board or association of realtors or MLS or any manner other than between the company and the seller. So we had to put this on. We had the lawsuit a couple of years ago where they were saying that we were price fixing. Our industry is price fixing. We're saying that everyone's a 6%. Okay. And that we are forcing people to pay the 6%, which is not true. Sometimes we say it that way. Like, what's the listing? How much is it? Or what are we going to charge? And you just say, well, I charge 6%, 7%, 8%, whatever it is. The lawsuit was that we were doing that. We were forcing people to do a standard listing, and there's no standard. So we had to put that in here so we can say, we don't charge a standard. We all just negotiated. Now, as a company, we try to get 6, 7, or 8, right?
so if we say like, this is my standard, when you're like, can you do it for 4? Like, no, 6 is my standard, but I can do 7, you know, but could you say that it's my standard?
Yeah, it's yours, yes. And what this is saying is it's between you and me, or like, so if I was a seller, you would be agreeing, we would be agreeing to that. What they don't want is it's creating this monopoly where all the real estate agents say, we're only selling homes for this price. And we're forcing the public to pay our prices. So that's the argument they have with it.
What happened? I think we lost technically, I guess.
No, it's still going on right now. It's actually a pretty big deal. We've been fighting it for the last 2 years because we're trying to prove, that's why this is in our contract, because we want to be able to say, it states right in our contract that that we'll negotiate that with our seller. Okay.
Who's suing us? Like,
Or no, he can
Yeah.
disclose
Some
that,
dude.
he's still in litigation.
Well, it's the for sale by owner market that's going after it. So it's not necessarily real estate agents, but there is some real estate companies that support that model and
I mean,
are, some support that model.
No names.
Yeah, so it's just something we have to be aware of. But here's something that's interesting on that section. And I think it's actually going to be a good thing, but here in the next probably couple of weeks or months, they're going to make that section on the MLS public. So right now, if you send a listing to your client, it doesn't have the BAC on there. Okay, if I send like my MLS to you, Alex, you're going to see all the details, but then when it says the agent remarks and the BAC, you don't see that, right?
Right.
They're going to put that public so that the BAC can be shown, so that they can see it, which I think is kind of a good thing, because have we ever had to go show a home that, I mean, we had one last week in my office that they offered $1 BAC, and it was like, you know, what do? You tell your client that they've got to pay you, and you know, that way it's really hard. But when you can show them, this is what they're offering me, and it's in their section, they're saying, oh, you're getting $1 for doing this property. We want to get away from a conversation. This is a conversation that's happened a lot in our industry, where we say, as a buyer's agent, it's free to use me. Have we ever heard that? It's free to use a buyer's agent. We really want to get away from that, because what we're doing is we're assuming it's free for them because the seller's paying for it. And the conversation we want with our buyer is, it's not free, but this will satisfy your requirement to pay me. So that if it comes up as $1, you can say, you know, it's fine to purchase this property, but there's risk involved. In order for me to represent you, you're going to have to pay this fee, not the seller. Okay.
Your buyer broker we sign.
With the buyer broker we sign. So the problem is what we're trying to get away from is agents will have them sign the buyer broker. And because we don't know how to explain what it costs, we get to that section and say, yeah, it says 3% and a $295 or $495 fee, but don't worry about it. The seller's going to cover that. So it actually doesn't cost you anything.
Except for the $4.95.
$495. Yeah.
You say it's free to use me until
It's
closing
not
date.
free. Yes, it's free to use me until we actually close on a property. Then you have to pay me.
Exactly.
That's pretty much what it is. Yeah, so that's something we want to keep in mind. The other common one, let's just kind of look at this right in the middle. There's 3 reasons why you get paid: A, B, and C. A is if you purchase the property and it records. That's the day where you're given the money. B is if it's leased. So let's say that your seller decides, well, it's the market's, I'm not going to get the price I want. I want to rent it out. According to our agreement, they should still have to pay us. Okay. And then C is if an option is put on the property. So an option agreement, there's a way you can buy a property where I put some money down and then I'm going to purchase the property in a year from now. Okay, that's an option. I purchased an option to buy your property at a certain price in however long it is there. What typically happens on that is an agent will say, well, yeah, I guess I'll get paid when it closes in a year from now. Okay. The reality is you should get paid right when they sign the option agreement. So what I usually do if I'm signing an option agreement, I make the option money my commission. So I say, okay, well, I'm going to make $15,000 on this property when it sells. in order for them to do an option on this one, they need to do $15,000 option money. That option money will come in, I'll get paid, and then they can close later. Some agents will split it. I would never do a I'll get paid in a year scenario. Like, yeah, so sometimes I'll go, you know, I'll take a 1.5% on signing this, and I'll take a 1.5% on the closing, just in case it doesn't go through. So that's what I would suggest on that. Any questions on the brokerage fee? Any questions on that extra brokerage fee, the $4.95, $2.95, any of that? Okay. These initials right here under number 2, we see missed all the time. This is just them acknowledging that you had that conversation. This just protects us, because I can't tell you how many agent or clients we have call and they're like, well, my agent never told me how much it was going to cost me to sell the home. If I would have known that it's going to cost me that much, I wouldn't have done that. And also get away from, I know of some agents, not in our company that I know of, because we tried to fix this, but I know one agent who takes 7% listings and offers a 1.5% BAC.
Wow, that's trash right there.
Yeah, so what we're trying to eliminate with this signature here, and what I think is gonna happen when they make it public, is the sellers are gonna be in for a rude awakening with that particular agent. Because what happens is that seller thinks they're splitting the commission, that agent is taking 90% of that commission. And this acknowledges that for the seller, so that that doesn't happen. It happens, it's in our industry. Yeah, so it happens in our industry. So I think it will be a good thing when it comes public. There'll be some things that will be a challenge, you know, when it's, but most of it, I think is going to be good. Okay, so protection period, number 3. Okay, what is it protecting us from?
If, say you have a showing with someone, they come in, then the seller goes in the back room and they're, hey, come back in 2 weeks and, you know, we'll do this private deal type thing. But don't you have to have a list? You have to like have an exclusion name list for that?
No,
Or is
you
it
don't.
anyone who showed?
So it's
To
like
protect
if you have already shown, or if you've already like, you've already gone under, well, I guess I'm thinking about the buyer side.
Yeah,
So if, like, you already,
so this is very similar to the buyer one.
yeah, so it's basically like if you already were the probable cause of the whole thing, and then, like, if you brought in a buyer for them,
Mhm.
and then they pulled out, and then later on another agent comes in and does the same buyer that you've already pulled in, that's where it would protect you, right?
Yeah, so on the buy, so on this is basically what it's protecting you is if the client came through your home while it was listed, and then during the protection period, they decide to come back and buy the home, then you'd still be offered the commission on that one. Okay, so whatever you put in that protection period. Going off of your story, this really did happen. The sellers got a hold of the buyer's information, called them later, and took them to dinner and said, if you drop your agent, our listing is expiring, we can give it to you the price you wanted for it. Luckily, that client, the buyer, in this case, the buyer called up the agent and said, hey, this is what happened. Is that weird or not? And he's like, yeah, you can't do that.
We're gonna sue someone.
Yeah, so it's just understanding. The interesting thing with this listing one though, okay, let's say, here, let me give you a scenario. Okay, I have the listing for 6 months. It didn't sell. I showed up last Saturday, I showed it to a buyer. Okay, they liked the home, then it expires, they didn't write an offer. Okay. 2 weeks later, they come back and they want to write an offer. Do I get the money on that? I wrote a 1 month protection period.
Is within the month, yes.
Yes, okay,
And you
so
should
we're clear on that, right?
Right.
I would be owed the commission on that. Now, let's say that I lose the listing and another agent lists the property on Monday, and now they have the listing. And then that buyer comes through the next week. Do I get paid or does the other agent get paid?
Still within the month.
Isn't it the other agent because it technically did lapse and he's still, no, just kidding, I don't know.
Yeah, you're on the right path.
Oh,
Okay, so a client isn't necessarily obligated to pay 2 commissions. So your contract ends, they sign a new listing agreement. That's where this protection period, like if, let's say I put it out for 6 months. 6 months doesn't do us any good for you to put it that long out, because if they take another listing and then they sell it, it doesn't matter, because they've got that, they would be owing 2 commissions and we can't pay it. They wouldn't, the law states they can't pay 2 commissions based off of that.
Wouldn't you wanna do 6 months anyway, like just for the simple fact of say they don't list it, cause I'm assuming you do this and they don't go, oh yeah, right as this expires, we're gonna relist again with someone else, so you like normally doesn't happen, right? So wouldn't it just be the safest? It's like,
Well,
may,
if
may
the
not.
seller doesn't know that buyer's interested and they're just ending the listing, they're taking another listing agent, they're not gonna know that transaction side of it. So,
That new listing
the
agent
new-
or anything?
They wouldn't know anything of it, and the seller wouldn't really know, because most of the time they don't know who the buyers are that come through.
Yeah.
Now, this protects you, this mainly protects you if they're trying to get around you.
Yeah.
It's not, if everything is in the up and up and everything's going smooth for the seller, it's not really protecting you. It's when they're trying to be dishonest that it protects you.
So as long as they don't have another agent when yours expire,
Then you're protected on
Then
them.
you're
Yeah.
protected.
So for me, I usually do 1 to 3 months on it. You can go as far as you want. You get so far out there, 3 months. Basically, you would be arguing that circumstances when this buyer came through the home and then they're buying it right now, nothing changed for that buyer. Because if they say, well, I got a new job, I couldn't afford it, and now I can afford it. Now there's a whole nother process that goes there. So I wouldn't muddy it with 6 months. Plus you have to watch the listing and see who buys it. So.
So that brings the next question too, is I don't know if it's on a listing or a buy or something, there's like a name list, right? Like in exclusions, like this person can't buy the property, or like if this person buys the property.
Yeah, you're talking about just an addendum to the exclusive right to sell. If the seller says, I want these people excluded from your agreement, then you would put that on an addendum that says, this person can't buy it and this person, or if this person buys it, you don't owe me, this person doesn't owe me, okay? My suggestion with that though, if you're gonna exclude anybody from it, I would only exclude them for 2 weeks, 30 days max. Because you're spending, if you take a listing, okay, you've taken 4 listings, anyone else taking listings in here? Okay, so we've got some listings. When you take a listing, when do you spend your money? The very beginning, like in the first day, first 2 weeks, when?
First day.
First day, right? First couple of days, right? So if I spend all of my money and I've excluded people, okay, and then I've shown it, I've worked really hard, and then 2 weeks later that exclusion comes in and I don't get paid, how happy am I on that? Not at all, right? So I will typically say, yeah, we can exclude them, but I want them to buy it soon. So if I'm going to exclude them for 2 weeks. If they come through and buy it in 2 weeks, you're not going to pay me. If they buy it in a month or 2 months, you still pay me because I'm still marketing your property.
Oh, so this is set by the seller.
This
The
is set-
seller writes the name.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
I don't want to exclude it as an agent. I don't want to exclude anybody.
yeah, unless it was like, like some, like say you had a client who's just total D-bag and like you, like you list a property,
Yeah.
like, oh, this guy wants the property, like,
Uh-huh.
sure, I know he's gonna come and try to stiff me, whatever, like maybe that, did you do that? Or that would just be an addendum? And you still get paid, I'm sure.
It would be, so it would always have to come from the seller. Like
That's
from
a
an
breach of
agent,
fiduciary
from an
duty.
agent that I say, I don't want you to buy this.
Fiduciary
have-
breach.
You've got to be really careful with that, because I mean, you just go into fair housing. Fair housing, there's groups of people that I can't exclude. And if I'm excluding them because I don't like them and they say I'm excluding them for some other reason, I'm in trouble. So
Alright, so it's set by the seller.
the seller, the only time that a seller would exclude them, like I'll list a for sale by owner home and they'll say, well, I had these people come through my house a couple of weeks ago before you were here. And if they buy the home, I don't want to pay you, which logically that makes sense. I mean, they showed the home and they did that. Well, if I give them a blanket, if they buy it anytime, well, I'm going to market it. I'm going to do all this stuff and I'm not going to get paid. So I'll say, that's fine. These people, they're excluded for 2 weeks. Go talk to them. Go tell them they got 2 weeks to buy the property. Otherwise, you have to sell it to somebody else, because it's always
At
that,
least pay me.
like 90% of the time, those don't go through.
Yeah.
if they're gonna go through, it's because, I mean, they're going through the process. But if somebody goes, I want to buy your home, most of the time it's, well, then act on it. You really want to buy it? You got 2 weeks.
Where's the earnest?
Earnest money, put it down, get a contract. And that's, as me as an agent, that's how I'm gonna control the situation if I'm gonna exclude anybody at all. Because I'm paying the money up front. I'm gonna spend 90% of my marketing budget is happening in the first week. And then if I don't get paid on it, I eat that, not them. Okay? Okay, that's protection period. Did that answer your question on the protection period? Why wasn't protected?
Yeah, that answered it.
Okay. Seller warranties, okay? I told you we were gonna go through this one really slow and then the next few will go really fast. So hopefully this is helpful for you to go through it. Seller's warranty and disclosures, okay? This one, we've gone through and written a lot of new things that the MLS one doesn't have. So I'm gonna highlight a few of them. The first one is, we've talked about this at length with the first section where it says, seller represents all recorded owners of the property. Make sure we. If you're online, you didn't tell me we were down in another section, so are you guys falling asleep? Yes, they're asleep. All right. Seller represents the recorded owners of the property. So this is where the seller is telling you that we are the owners of the property. So if we don't do our job and figure it out, this is some of our protection right here, but they're telling us that they are the owners of the property. Skip down a few lines where it says seller agrees they will not enter into another ERS agreement with any other brokerage. Okay, if the seller does enter into another agreement, the ERS shall govern. This is what protects us with the effective date. So if I put the effective date out 2 weeks on the top here, this section right here protects me. So if they want to go and sign another listing agreement, I still have that listing agreement. Okay, that's what that says. That skip down a little bit further, it says buyer, let's see, the seller agrees to furnish buyer with good and marketable title and pay its settlement for a policy of title insurance. This is where they're agreeing they're going to pay for title insurance. So when a buyer comes in and they complain about, why do I have to pay for their title insurance? Well, they're already agreeing to it. A little bit further down, they're going to complete the seller's property condition disclosure form and the wire disclosure form. And then the last 2 lines of this section is what I want to bring up. It says the company let's see, it says seller will be required to notify the listing agent and or the company in writing of any defects of the property known to the seller that materially affect the value of the property. If this notification is not provided in writing to the listing agent or the company, it's as if notification did not occur at all. So why do we think we have this in here? This came from a lawsuit that we had to fight. Why do you think that line right there is in the contract?
Somebody did disclose something on the seller disclosures?
Okay, so if the seller didn't disclose something on the seller's disclosures, that's on the seller. Why do you think an agent would be in trouble if they didn't? So I have seller's disclosures. I fill out my seller's disclosures. Do you know what's wrong with my home? As an agent, you don't, right? Okay, so you have to take those seller's disclosures at face value that they're telling the truth, right? Okay, what if the seller comes in and says, well, I had this, the rainstorm last week flooded and there was water coming down from the roof, but I already patched it and I fixed it. We're good. What happens?
Well, what happened? They say, oh yeah, I made repairs or.
Yeah, you disclose.
Okay, so the proper way is disclose it, right? Okay, but let's say the seller didn't update their seller's disclosures. Then they go through and they close. They told you about it. You didn't do anything about it, and then they close. And then after closing, they come back and they say, hey, there was this leak. You didn't disclose it.
Transaction, sorry.
Yeah, mid-transaction.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to disclose everything that happens in the property, even while under contract.
Okay, so what if the seller doesn't disclose? So let's address that first. The proper way to do it is if something happens in the property, you disclose it, right? We're clear on that?
Right.
Okay, now let's say that the seller doesn't disclose it.
Or they disclose it to the agent verbally, but it's not in writing here. right?
Yeah.
But wasn't there something like from real estate school, I remember something about like, you should have or could have known about it, so therefore you're responsible for passing that information along as an agent.
As an agent, okay? So basically what it comes down to is if you tell me something, I have the obligation to tell someone else, right? Material fact, right? Okay, so what we're saying here is that unless you go ahead.
Oh, it's you.
It's you.
Echo. How come it's echoing?
That's weird. Is it off? It's not doing it. It really just depends on what you want to do. What I do online. is
Okay.
like 1, 2, 3.
Is that better? That was weird.
It's really weird.
I'm gonna tell myself to mute. Hey, whoever's online.
Oh, there we go, there we go. Does it have a audio?
Somebody's messing with you.
It's Rick.
Recording in progress.
Hell.
Hey, what's your friend?
Mute everyone. It's probably someone's speaker that's like relaying around.
Yeah. Is that better?
Oh,
I don't know.
Say something really loud.
Okay, are you ready to go?
Okay, we're good.
Okay. I don't know. Can you still hear me online? Maybe I muted us.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, that was really weird. It was like double feedback from myself. Okay, so what were we talking about? Well, we were talking about the in writing. So basically what we're saying is if somebody tells us something, we want it as a company in writing to be disclosed as you actually told me. So just because you said there's a problem with the piping issue, you said that to your agent. I want that in writing before I go talk to somebody else and say, there's a problem with the plumbing, or there's a problem with the electrical. Okay, so this is where that protects us. And the problem we had was the agent was told of something there. They didn't think anything of it, totally forgot to pass on that information. And then they came back and said, oh, you knew about this and you should have disclosed it. This is telling the seller that if they're going to tell us something about the property, do it in writing so that we have proof that you told us. So it's not, you said this, I said this kind of a conversation. Okay, so that's why we just do the disclosure. There's always something in a home that, like, we think that a seller who lives in a home should remember every single thing that they've done in the home. Okay, I had an experience with an older gentleman and didn't disclose anything about the furnace, and it worked just fine. But when the new buyer came in, they called up and they said the furnace doesn't work. Like, what's wrong? It was working in the inspection and everything was good. It's not working now. We want you guys to fix it. So I called the guy up. So the older gentleman, right? He's probably in his 80s. And I said, what's wrong with the furnace? He says, well, there's nothing wrong with the furnace. There's a little hammer on the top. If you just hit it on the side, it starts right up.
Oh my.
So, and it did work actually. The hammer did actually work.
As long as you lift the instructions, you're okay. You hit it
So-
with the hammer.
Yeah. So from his perspective, why didn't you disclose that? That's normal for me to do that. Like, he lived there so long. It was like, well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. You just hit the little motor and get it going a little bit. And it's just like, anyway, yeah. So there's things that your seller, no, we had a home warranty on it. So we just referred back to the home warranty because it was working. It does work. And then we referred back to that. So, but yes, I mean, if it really wasn't working
There wasn't a warranty.
and there wasn't a warranty, then the seller could be liable for that. So in that particular case, that's where the lawsuits come for sellers, is when we don't disclose. But if they've lived there for so long, you don't think about certain things. I mean, you just get used to it. I mean, we have doors in our house that you have to like shut a certain way to make them work. You're just used to that, like a front door that if you turn to the right, it doesn't work, but if you turn to the left, it works every time, and you get used to turning it to the left. So when you're filling out the disclosures, you're not thinking, oh yeah, there's this issue, I need to disclose it. So that's where that comes in. Okay, any questions about seller's disclosures?
So as long as it's in writing, you're okay.
Yeah, have them tell you in writing. So here's a good technique that I use. I use this with a lot of my clients. It doesn't matter what the conversation is. If I'm having a phone conversation with my client and they say something that's important, then at the end of the conversation, I'm going to say, hey, just so that I know that I didn't miss anything, I'm going to send you an email with some of the points that we just talked about. Just acknowledge that, or let me know if I missed anything. And then they'll look at it and say, yep, that sounds good. Now I have documents of what was said in our conversation. Otherwise, you know, there's a lot of times we have a conversation and then that's, yeah, remember I told you this? And you're like, I have no idea I don't remember that conversation. That never happened. And literally it usually doesn't.
So let's say in our scenario, the seller's in the middle of the transaction. The seller, there was a leak, they fixed it, it's patched, they told you verbally, they didn't give you anything in writing. Are you still held liable if you forget and don't do anything about it?
So it would be, so in this, based on this, it would go back on the seller.
Right.
Because they're saying, I will do it. So would you be lumped into the lawsuit? Yes. Would ultimately, this is what would
Protect you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now,
Not that it-
yeah.
But
No, I mean, obviously, if they're telling you, I would just get it in writing, but this is disclosed. Remember, this is disclosing to the seller what their responsibilities are. Like sometimes we just blow over these contracts, where it's like sign these things. And then we'll get it on the market.
Yeah.
The reality is we want to make sure they're aware of what they're signing. And if you're aware of it, then you can just talk through the points. So when we go through it, I can just talk through it and say, here's what you disclosed to me. Just make sure that if you know of anything in the property, whether it happens today or happens 2 weeks from today or before closing, let me know. And then I'll just make sure I have it in writing. Make sense? Do you have a question?
Is a napkin considered in writing?
A napkin? Yeah, I guess it would be considered in writing.
Just upload it to the
You
loop.
just upload, yeah, upload it to the loop. Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's in writing,
Make sure it's dated and signed.
Yeah.
Yep.
They've signed it.
so. Yeah, anything that's in writing. Okay, number 5, agency disclosures. So duty of the seller's agent, just want to emphasize the bottom part there. As agents for the sellers, they have a fiduciary duty to the seller to include loyalty, obedience, full disclosure, confidentiality, reasonable care, and any other duties required by law. And then the limited agency, the big one I want to emphasize is on the bottom. It just says, because we are limited, agent cannot provide party with undivided loyalty, confidentiality, and disclosure. So those are the 3 fiduciary duties that become limited when you are a limited agent. Okay, that's even if the company is limited. Remember, the company owns the listing. So if Alex takes the listing and Melissa, you are the buyer, we still have a limited agency agreement because we're in the same company, even though they aren't talking. Make sense? Any questions on that? Okay, now we'll kind of go through this fairly quickly now because we're oh, actually, there's one more section that's long. Sorry. Professional advice. The most important parts we just bolded. So let's read those real quick. Seller is advised not to rely on the company or on any agents of the company for determination regarding the physical or legal conditions of the property. And then you skip down, strongly recommend that the seller obtain such independent advice. If the seller fails to do so, the seller is acting contrary to the advice of the company. Okay, so this is regards to anything pertaining to the property that we aren't really a professional in. Taxes, I get a lot of questions from sellers like, you know, is this is my primary residence, so I get to have the tax exempt thing for a primary residence, right? But we all know that the standard is an individual's 250 and a couple is 500,000 if they're a primary resident, right? But that's not our role to talk to them about. Okay, so just you can let them know, and I just always just say that. I just say, You know, my job is to help you buy and sell properties and give you, and help you gather information. If you have specific questions about zoning, taxes, hazardous waste, anything like that, you can call a professional and I can help you find somebody like that, right? So that's what that advice is. Number 7, dispute resolution. That one is, we're gonna go to mediation before we go to courts. Remember, any legal action taken, it has to be taken by the company, not by you as an agent. So let's say that you get screwed over on your commission. So you are upset because they owe you a commission. The brokerage has to go after them, not you as an agent, okay? It's the same as the buyer contracts. I do see that the seller contracts will probably go after more aggressively, just because we're doing a lot more work on those at the start. So that's where that is. Attorney fees, governing, that's the same as in the buyer section. Whoever's at fault gets to pay it all. If you're going after a seller for less than $5,000, it's going to cost you more to go after it. So sometimes those are ones we just have to swallow our pride and say that was a learning experience. But just so you know, I mean, if you have a problem on your listings, come to us and see what we can do. But I can tell you that if it's less than a $5,000 commission check, we probably won't fight it, but it just depends. Especially, we had a seller that we went after 2 years ago because it was obvious what they were doing and they were purposefully taking us out so they didn't have to pay us. And we had all the evidence that they were doing it. So we actually did go after them for a smaller amount, but we had a lot of evidence against them. Like I think they ended up settling before we actually took it. It was like he was selling 3 properties, and our listing agreement, we brought in the buyers and then he canceled all on the buyers and was defaulting on the buyers because he wanted to make money on the back end. So he had buyers upset, he had listing agents upset, he had everybody upset, but he didn't really care until he realized that it was going to get super expensive. Yes, got expensive. So, and then I think that, I don't know exactly if he paid out on all of them, but I think they paid some on them. Number 9, this is a big section that I want to make sure we cover real quick. Seller authorizes the advertising. Disclosing the MLS after closing. We kind of think this is not a big deal because we just always put it on the MLS, but Utah's a non-disclosed state. So the only way we can disclose things is getting permission to put it on the MLS, which when we do that, then we can disclose it for everybody else. It helps us as an industry because it gives us comparables. We have an issue that came up last week in my office in Orem, where the buyer's offer said they didn't want it to be disclosed on the MLS, and the seller signed it, and then we disclosed it to the MLS. And the buyer was mad at us and is trying to sue us for that. The reality is the rep C and this contract pertaining to the same people. The exclusive right to sell and the rep C. Who's the parties of the rep C? Buyer and seller. Who's the parties of the exclusive right to sell? Brokerage and seller. The buyer's trying to negotiate something with the seller that pertains to us. So they agreed to it, seller agreed to it, and we did something over here. They tried to come after us and they didn't win because
Could they go after this?
they can go after the seller. Yes, so unfortunately, that's probably what they're doing.
So like the buyer didn't want public knowledge, like what they paid for the house, so it's the buyer.
The buyer didn't want it. Okay,
So would it fall back on the agent for not advising
I have one
properly?
too.
the listing agent,
Yeah, to not advise like the other agent, like even though they should probably know.
yeah, I don't think they're gonna be an issue on that, but they try to pull everybody into it. I mean, the reality is our agreement said we're gonna disclose it and we disclosed it, so. Yes, the agent should have seen that in the contract. My guess is they didn't know that we would disclose it and we disclosed it. So But yeah, he didn't want, he didn't want it disclosed, so. And it was disclosed. Oops. Yep, okay, B, MLS square footage of the property. Okay, this is just where you're checking where it's at. County records, appraisal, building plans, etc. Okay, let's give you a scenario. Let's say that the county records say one number. You got an appraisal, says another number, and you have building plans that say a third number. As an agent, which ones do you use? Which one? County records? Okay,
County records.
county records?
Did you use the appraisal that happened recently?
Yeah, okay, so why, let's figure out why we want the county records. I'm not saying that's right, actually, it's not right, but why would we think the county records? It sounds most official, that's why most people pick it, right? Okay, all we want is some official documents that state it, so it's not like, so I have the county records versus my seller's measurements. Which one's more official? County records. I have an approved, signed, paid for appraisal and county records. Which one's more accurate? Appraisal, okay, maybe. I mean, they could have run two, but it's certified. And all I'm doing is, this is where I'm disclosing, that's where I got the information. So if I have building plans that say the home is gonna be 5,000 square feet, my tax records say 4,500 square feet, and my appraisal says 5,700 square feet. As long as we check the box that has the number and that's where you're disclosing it, I got my 5,700 from the appraisal. They come back and they say, well, your county records say it's only 5,000 square feet. Well, here's the appraisal. That's what I'm going on. Then you're protected.
The golden tickets, fires to verify, whatever, the old phrase.
Yeah, they put in the MLS.
Fire to verify all information.
Yeah.
Yes, except for it doesn't get you off the hook for blatantly lying.
Yeah. But like in this situation, like
In this-
you know,
that's what all it's
I got
saying
the
is-
county record, it says county record.
Right.
But you know, verify.
But what happens is the county records say this, they come back and they say, well, we built this whole other wing on the house and that square footage is another 900 square feet.
Then
So
don't do your
you-
due diligence, yeah.
And you don't do your due diligence and you
Mess it up.
mess it up. Okay, C, obtain financial information. That's so that you can get a payoff from the property and see who's on the property. C or D, keys to the property. E is a key box installed on the property. Okay, if you use a non-MLS key box, just keep in mind that that opens you up for liability too. If you use the MLS one, this one says right here, the MLS approved key boxes, and something happens, let's say that some person opens the box, gets in the house, vandalizes the house, you're still protected. But if you put a combination box on there and somebody else uses a combination box and they get in there, you've got to be really careful with that.
So my last listing, they had the little combination on the front door
Mhm.
that you can just type it in. Should I have used, I didn't do this, but should I have used a super key with the code inside instead of a key?
Yeah, I think
Would
that
be protected
that would
way?
protect you
Instead of
on that
just
one.
getting code out?
Uh-huh.
This is so cool.
Yeah, because then you have a record that says, I don't give the code out.
Yeah.
I'm protected because I have this box. They're gonna open the box. They're gonna get
Because
that.
if the owners give the code out and someone goes in, it's not on your watch.
It's not, yeah, it's
Right.
not the you're not gonna get in trouble for that. But if I put a combo on there and then like, let's say, you see this a lot, where on the MLS it says, you know, it's vacant, go and show, here, the code is this, right?
Yeah.
Well, what happens is you open yourself up for a lot of liability. So stop opening yourself up for liability. In fact, I'm gonna share a story about,
Letter was that?
that one is
90.
E. Okay, F is hold open houses on the property. G, place a for sale sign on the property. H is order the preliminary title report. J, home warranty, gives you the permission to order one. This is a big one, J. Communicate with the seller for the purpose of soliciting real estate related goods and services during and after the term of the listing agreement. This is not in the MLS one. So why would you think we have that? SOI, okay, but what would be the reason that we want permission to be able to talk to them?
So that we can talk.
Yeah.
Then in 5 years, we can sell. another
You can
one.
still talk to them. Okay, so it pertains to the do not call list. Okay, let's say that they're on the do not call list. What the do not call list states is that if I enter in a relationship with you, a professional relationship with you, I can communicate with you. 6 months after that's over, I have to stop communicating with you. Then you could be in violation of the do not call list. Could be 18 now. I thought it was 6, but either way, this gives you permission that you can talk to them a lot longer.
Forever.
Yeah. Yes, forever. You will be in my system forever.
Sound like-
Okay, place earnest money in interest bearing account. Century 21 does not have an interest bearing account, so we don't do that. Let's see, L is,
Why did they write it then like that?
some companies have interest bearing accounts and they want to put it in there.
But isn't this a Century 21 Everest thing?
Yeah, but if, it's basically giving us permission if we ever want to do that. The advantage to that is when you're buying something really big, you know, if earnest money is really big and you put it in an interest bearing account, I mean, think about it. At any given time, our Century 21 trust account has millions of dollars in it. That's a lot of interest if we collected interest. And the problem is,
Just go to Century 21 Everest.
well, that's why we don't do it, because it's too muddy on where that interest should be going. So every time you put it into those accounts, you have to disclose where this interest is going to go. And I don't think it would fly if we said, yeah, it's going back into our pockets.
So if
I mean, it'd be nice.
seller is reading this and asking questions on it, when we get to K, we.
I just say, we don't have an interest bearing account.
It
We don't have to
says
worry
this,
about
but
it.
our account is not interest bearing.
Yeah, we have a no, we don't have an interest bearing account. And that discloses where we would put it too, just so that you know.
It's gonna be a weird question, but like, isn't interest is paid by like the bank, like for having money in their account? So
Well, that's where-
typically, like,
That's
the-
where the money is. It's in a bank
the
account.
bank- Yeah, so wouldn't, I mean, if the sellers or the buyer, whoever's putting their money in the account isn't like paying anything? Like, wouldn't it be okay if we?
Would it be
capitalize on
okay?
that? Yeah, or like where,
I don't
I
know.
see you're saying like, oh, you're just getting more money, but. It's that you're not paying for it. no
It
one's
could
paying
be
for it.
like considered the fee to hold the money.
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I can
So-
tell you that when somebody's already paying some money to someone else,
Yeah.
and there's even another $10 wiring fee, you sometimes have to have a discussion on why they have to pay $10.
they're
You're
not-
paying 150,000 down, but you're complaining about the wire fee that it's gonna cost you to wire it. If you haven't had that experience yet with a buyer or a seller, you will.
I'm that person.
Yeah, and and the reality is a lot of people like that. You don't want to just throw the money away and then it just becomes messy. So for us, doesn't make sense. L is a big one that we've added into our contract. So I'm going to read this one. When property is pending or under contract, seller instructs seller's agent to not present any additional offers unless an offer is designated as a backup offer. All additional offers will be presented if instructed in writing by the seller. Okay, so basically I have a seller who has accepted an offer and I get another offer that comes in. I don't have to show that to my client. Okay, so you might ask yourself the question, why would I not want to show it to my client? Why do you think I wouldn't want to show it to my client?
Way better off.
Could be a way better offer. Yeah.
Or like, what do you mean? So
Or
you
if
get
you
an
waste
offer and
time.
you
So,
accept it.
I've accepted Alex's offer. Okay, then you sent me another offer and it's better than his offer, but I've already accepted his offer. What's the problem right now?
He's already told his clients.
He's already told his clients and his clients can't take that offer.
And this is, I'm assuming, you posted on the MLS, you're under contract?
Yeah.
for Another offer?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, man, wouldn't that be the agent submitting that offer, who's in a turd, pretty much?
It
I know it's
happens.
under contract, I know it's a good offer, but you know it's a.
So it usually happens when it like, okay, we're accepting another offer. No, I'm sending you another offer. And you're like, we're already accepted an offer. And then they send something that's ridiculous that you know they're not going to follow through with. They're just trying to get an offer accepted. And they send it 10,000 higher than what you have been spending an hour convincing your seller that this is the best offer you're going to get. You should sign it. And then they sign it and then you show them an offer that they could have signed that's $10,000 more. You see where that could become a problem, especially when they're being a jerk and they're sending it over and they're like, they're not going to buy it for that much more. They're gonna get an appraisal, they're gonna bring it down. It creates a problem. So this gives us an opportunity to say, I got an accepted offer, I'll hold your offer, and if something happens with this offer, I'll submit your offer and we can move forward. The other form requires you to show every single offer that comes in. Okay. The other problem that creates is if you're doing a short sale, which we don't do a lot anymore, but if you submit an offer to the bank, it goes through the process. If you submit another offer to the bank, it slows the process down. So this gives you the right to, I've submitted an offer, I'm going to hold these until something happens. M, in the event a buyer's agent requests to present an offer in person to the seller gives a written authorization to the brokerage to decide if the offer will be presented in person or not. Okay, this is not as common as it used to be. Used to be where the buyer's agent would go to the seller's house, sit down and show them the offer. We'd sit down at the table and say, this is what my buyer is doing. My buyers are in the car, counter me, I'll go out in the car and talk to them and come back. That's how it used to be done. Some agents will still want that opportunity. This gives you an opportunity to say, nope. Okay, any questions on that? Personal property, 10. Right in the middle is what I like to hear. It's the seller agrees to hold the company harmless for any loss or damage that might result from any showings or inspections completed on behalf of the potential buyer. Okay, this one saved us once in this company because I think the seller was just sue happy, but they called up and they said, the buyer who showed my home came in the house and kicked my dog and I had to put my dog down. So apparently the dog died. And so obviously what we did is we called up the buyer's agent and we said, you're the only one that showed the property and the seller is claiming that you came in the house and you kicked their dog and now the dog is dead. And she said, the agent said, no, the dog was just laying in the corner. We didn't touch the dog. It was not even, didn't do anything. It was just over there, probably already dead. But the reality was, is she was suing everybody because she felt like she was, that happened on our watch. So as an agent, we were responsible for it. And as the buyer agent who kicked her dog, who personally, I don't believe kicked the dog, but I wasn't there and I didn't see the videos. There was no videos, but the reality is this is what protects us here is they're going to hold us harmless if something happens during our watch. However, if we use a key box, it's not our key box and we let other people, that could come back and bite us. Okay, so if you use the key box, you let the people in that are only agents and something happens during that process, this is what protects us. Any questions on that?
Because when you time stuff, it's like, oh yes, looks like you clocked in 11. I mean, she doesn't see her dog till 4 in the afternoon. It's like maybe like 7 showings.
Yeah, no, it was, no, she started talking about how she was suing lots of different people and I just figured that was the MO for her. So there are lots of those people out there and I would suggest that if you get involved with them, don't let the commission win in your conscience. Just say, I'll let somebody else deal with that one and earn the commission. Or deal with it and see what happens. Okay, attachments, just reiterate that the seller's property disclosures and the MLS and wire fraud disclosures are incorporated in the listing. Okay. IRPTA, does anyone know what that is and why we have it in here? To give a real quick definition of what it is.
Outside of the country, trying to purchase real estate here.
Yeah, okay, so buy and sell real estate in there. It pertains to the taxes, okay? So what they don't want is somebody from another country coming in, selling the property, taking all the proceeds, and then the government is out of that tax bill, right? Okay, so we're having them acknowledge this here, that they're not, so that we don't have any issues with the title. There was a title company just here locally that didn't catch it, that they were foreign. that they had moved out, and there was a $35,000 tax bill that was levied on that title company because they didn't catch it. So this is one where we want to just make sure we're disclosing it. Okay.
So I do have a question around that. It's not happened to me, but I was about to submit an offer on one when they did disclose that they were moving to Colombia.
Mhm.
If they are, like, if they're living here, but then they're now moving back to their country,
Mhm.
do they say yes or no?
So are they from a different country?
Probably, because they're moving forever.
Then they would say yes on that. So what happens is they're gonna say yes, and they'll take those taxes out and they'll hold those for the tax season. So they just won't, like, but what they're trying to do, so for us, you sell your house, let's say you sell an investment property and you make $100,000 on that investment property. Okay, when do I pay taxes on that $100,000? So I bought it in March of this year, and now I've got the $100,000 in my bank account. When do I pay taxes? The next year, right? I file the taxes the next year. Well, if I take the $100,000 and then I move to Colombia, how will they get their money? They won't. That's what they want to
So
get.
this is for them to withhold it before giving them the proceeds.
Yeah. Okay, so, and as we know, the government doesn't just say, oh, well, that kind of stinks. They moved out of the country. What do they do? Oh, shucks. What do?
Get it somehow.
They lien the property. Well, who just bought the property?
You got it.
My client. Now the tax bill comes up. Who pays the taxes on that? The buyer is now obligated to pay those taxes. So it's a lien on their property. So now the buyer bought a property, they think, oh, this is great. And then all of a sudden they get a $35,000 lien on their property the next tax season because the government says, I don't care who pays them, I just want it. So the seller's long gone. The buyer comes in, and then surprise, and who do you think gets the first phone call? You. And then what do? Oh crap, cry. And then you go to the title agency, and if and it's not always on the title agent. If the title agent doesn't know, I mean, how do they know? This is how we're disclosing it.
Box only, pretty much.
That's where that's why if you ever miss that checkbox, the office will flag it and say, you need to do an addendum to make sure this is checked.
So here's a weird question.
Mhm.
Being, one time I was a resident alien, okay, so being a resident alien, you have to reapply or update your residency every 10 years.
Right.
Okay, as the last year, let's say you're on your 9.5 year of resident, and you have no plans of redoing it again, you're gonna go back to Mexico.
Right.
Okay, so in that case, are you the FERPA or not? Because you can sell the house, right? And
Yeah.
and you can actually, you're not a resident at that time.
Yeah, you're not.
Is that making sense?
Yeah, so this isn't saying I'm moving. It's just saying that I have an ability to do that. So it would still be a yes, and then you'd figure out how that happens. So it's really just to make sure we're pulling the money aside for it. So you'd still be part of it, yeah, even if you didn't move. Most people aren't moving. Most of it's not. Like, it's the fraudulent ones that are saying, I'm gonna take the money and leave.
I'm just
But most
Yeah.
people are just, I'm gonna sell this property, I'm gonna go here, I'm not a US citizen, so they can't come after me for the taxes and lien me for that. That's where they're protecting it. So even if you stay, it's not like like sometimes we look at contracts and say, okay, well, they check the box FHA, they're not really a great buyer, right? That's like our assumption of it, where an FHA buyer could be just as strong or stronger than a conventional buyer. We just don't know the backstory. If somebody checks is here, it's not this is not a good offer, this is not a good thing. It's just good. Now we know we have to make sure that that's covered in our title report. That's all it is. It's not like, oh, they're going to get something wrong and they're going to have to pay extra stuff. They're going to lose money. It's just making it aware. This is just a disclosure.
I'm just overanalyzing.
Yeah, don't worry about it. If they're not a US citizen in this case, I would check the is.
Okay.
Okay, 13, equal housing opportunity. This is one where we're running into a problem now where people are sending love letters with their offer. You know, my family is the la 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 la, right? Okay, this is one that's creating a huge issue with this equal housing opportunity and you know, the fair housing stuff. So the way that I do it, especially if I get lots of offers, I'll just put them all the offers on like a spreadsheet, and I'll just take names out, and I'll just do, here's the numbers, what offer do you want? Then they pick the offer they want, and I go, okay, great, let's sign it and let's go. And that way they're not looking at their name and saying, oh, I don't want that person in my neighborhood. They're not looking at, you know, their status. They're not looking at, you know, what their family looks like. They're just deciding based on finances, whatever the bottom line is and what makes sense for them is how that is. 14, electronic. We can do everything on the computer to sign it. Due on sell. Who knows what due on sell clause means?
Any sort of liens or encumbrances is due by the seller.
Okay, so this pertains to if I'm going to sell the property and do a seller finance it or something, and then the bank calls the loan due. We're just telling them that, hey, if you have a due on sell clause and we're selling this and you're keeping the loan in place, just be aware they could call it due, just so you know. And then the entire agreement. Okay, any questions about the exclusive right to sell? That was the 90% I was talking about.
I do have one.
Okay.
Number 12, where you said if they're not a US citizen to put is. That's what you said, right? If they're not a
Okay,
US
Southern Warrants
citizen,
is a
to select
company.
is.
That's when I asked you a question about.
And then sell it is a foreign person. Yeah.
So you would put yes.
Yeah, is. What did I say? Did I say is not?
No, you
So
said
you
is,
said
correct.
is.
But
Yeah, if they are a foreign person.
So if they're not a US citizen, you would put is.
so what if they're a resident alien, let's say, what if resident alien?
Like, what if they, yeah, like. what if
Okay,
they
so
have
let's
no
read through
legal
it.
Status or just a resident of the United States, they would still withhold their money.
It's not the withholding the money. I'm just telling you, if that's the scenario, if they're moving out of the state.
What, yeah.
Yeah, what this is just saying, okay, what's the scenario gonna happen? So when the title sits down and writes the papers and says, okay, what are we doing with this money? Okay, and it's somebody who's a resident that's not from the US, but they're staying here. Okay, they're gonna treat that differently than somebody who's like, where are they going? How are we documenting you? How will the government find your money? Now, if there is no way that the government can find your money, they'll withhold the money. But if you say, well, this is where I am, this is what I have, this is my green card, this is my status, then they're not holding the money for that. Does that make sense?
So then that becomes it's not,
Well, no, it still is an is,
okay?
but it's, so what we're confusing here is we're trying to get away from I am or I'm not, okay? The result are different. What happens because you do yes and no is different, okay? If I do yes, there's 3 scenarios, pretend. Let's say there's 3 different things they can do, and they'll base it off that individual. If they say no, well, then there's no scenario. We're not dealing with it. But if you're a foreign person and you're not a US citizen, they have to handle it a certain way. And sometimes if they're moving out of the country, they might hold the money. That's one scenario. Sometimes they just say, okay, well, where are you moving to? Oh, you're moving over here. Great. We can document where that money's going. Here's your money. Now the government can get their money, right? They just want to document that. So if there's a place for it, they'll still send the money
It's
to
just
you.
a flag.
Wouldn't this be more like for somebody who does report as a W-9 and then changes their status to a W-8 status?
That's a tax question that I don't know that. I don't know I know what a W-9 is. I'm not sure what a W-8 is. So
Basically, the W-9 would be somebody that carries a social security number.
Yeah, so
And the-
what I would suggest on this is we probably should have a title person come in and give us all the scenarios of what they do with it. So all you have to know in this is that if they're foreign, not a US citizen, they need to check the box.
So
Yes.
ask, are you legal resident or are you a citizen? And then based on that.
Typically, I just let them read that section and say, answer this question.
Yeah.
So I leave it for them to answer than me assuming, are you a US citizen or are you not a US citizen? Because that puts it into, like, could I be not a US citizen?
They take it the wrong, like, somebody could take it the wrong way. anyway,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, so I mean, like, for all you guys know, I'm not from here
you could-
and I'm not a US citizen, right? But we're doing some assuming when we start asking questions about, well, you seem like you're not from the US, so you should answer this question, right? We don't want to get into that mess. All I would say is, we just need you to disclose, read through this, disclose what you are. Because from our standpoint, all we care about is they disclose it. What if they lie to us?
We don't care.
Well, we care. It's not very nice, but we can't prove it. That makes sense? So I would say that the best way to do it is figure out I don't know what the title company, I know holding it back is one option, but there's 2 or 3 different options that they do. And it's mainly how they're reporting it. And when you sign documents and on your settlement, they're reporting it there too. So this is just double reporting to make sure it's correct. And it's just so that it protects everybody. Okay? Okay, so the next one is this residential input form. Okay, there's only like 4 things I want to cover on this, so we're gonna skip through it unless you have more questions. The first one is, I've got a lot of questions on the very bottom. It says effective year built. Okay, who knows what the effective year built is? It should be.
The start of the bill.
Isn't it the date when the city gives you the allow certificate of occupancy?
Okay, so how does an older home get a new, like if you see a home that was built in 1960, now has an effective date of 2015? Okay,
When it's been upgraded,
okay, when it's upgraded,
When all the codes are up to date.
okay, when all the codes are up to date. Okay, so all of those could change the effective date. So what I want you to be aware of on this effective date is there isn't necessarily a specific answer, and so it's a really weird number. A lot of times you'll see a neighborhood, they'll say this neighborhood should have been updated in 1990. So the effective date of this neighborhood is now 1990. It's a tax way of doing things. So I wouldn't necessarily put a lot of weight into this. So I wouldn't really be worried about what that says on the ML or on the tax data. It could give you a date. It could be for any one of those reasons. If they do an upgrade on the home and then they come out and reassess it, they'll do an effective date. If the occupancy, there's an effective date. So I bring it up because we all have different opinions of what it could be. And the reality is every one of those changes at some point or another. So don't be so caught up in the effective date on that. Okay, let's jump to the middle of the second page where it talks about the graphs. Okay, a lot of questions about what these stand for. So if you see bath F34H, okay, an F is a full bath. That means a bathroom or toilet, shower, and tub. 3/4 is a shower, no tub. And then a half is just toilet and sink. Okay. The other question I get a lot is the kitchen, K, B, F, and S. So does anyone know what those are?
Kitchen, basement.
I know that the S stands for side, or like side,
Okay. S stands for side.
right?
Okay.
Breakfast.
kitchen, breakfast, and parlor.
Yeah. Okay. Those are the ones.
I don't know.
No, you guessed it right. Okay. First one is the kitchen. B is a breakfast bar. So that's like, I have a counter that I can put bar stools by, breakfast bar. F is for fine dining room. So if you have one of those dining rooms that's next to the kitchen that has a little.
Stanford Counseling.
Yeah,
No, that was the F.
that was F.
And it's formal, would that be?
That's formal.
Formal or
And then-
fine dining.
Yeah, formal, fine dining. And then S is semi-formal, which is like right off the kitchen, like right next to the counter kind of a thing. That would be semi-formal.
So
Okay.
fine dining would be like a separate room, like that
Yeah.
separate room.
Yeah, fine dining or formal room. That would be the separate. So like if you walk into a house and they have like a kitchen table over here in a separate room, and then you come over here, that's what that room is called.
No, so what was the bathroom again? I'm sorry.
The
It was
bathroom?
Full, it has a sink, toilet and shower
And tub.
on top.
Or it could be a tub with also a shower head.
Yeah.
It's just that it has the tub, not just
That
like a
has a tub.
stand-up shower on its own.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
then
difference.
3/4, it has a shower but no tub.
Is in the shower, no tub.
Okay.
And then the H is a half bath, which is just a toilet and sink.
Okay.
Okay. Third page. The ones that we get here. So if you go down to the middle section, listing information. Okay, there's a couple of things I want to know. This first one here that says owner's name. Okay, this one, I always think is super funny. Agents don't want to put the owner's name on the MLS for I don't know what reason. I think they're just afraid that they don't want the owner's name on the MLS. But the owner's name is public knowledge where?
County records.
County records, right? So when I write an offer up, I have to go to the county records to find out who the owner is. What I'm suggesting is when you take a listing, just put the owner's name there so that when somebody's writing an offer, they get the right name. They can find it anyway.
I always recommend doing the county office as well, because there's been times where I wrote offers,
Mhm.
with the name on the NLS and it was wrong.
Yeah, so I just see a blank a lot or owner of record, as they'll write there, and it's like, I can find it, just save me some time and put it there. But it's up to you, you don't have to put it there. Listing type, EAL and ERS. Okay, exclusive agent listing or exclusive right to sell. The exclusive agent listing, we don't do as Century 21. We don't allow that kind of agency. Basically, it's, you just represent the one person. I don't represent the seller. I'm going to represent them for this person. We just do the for sale by owner agreement stuff. Exclusive right to sell, that's taking the listing. This one came up. Not gonna say names again too. Alex knows this person. Both photos. Does everyone know that Century 21 provides photos for your listings? Okay. So utilize those. Next is dual rate. Who knows what dual rate means? Okay.
So a dual rate would mean that the BAC and the seller's agents are different.
Okay, so it's basically if you see a dual rate is checked yes, and you're putting an offer, you're a buyer, you're putting an offer in on a property, and the agent who represents the seller is putting an offer in for somebody else, a buyer, they're going to do limited agency, they're putting an offer in for somebody else, they're adjusting the commission for his offer. So they could be a better offer than yours because their commission is changing. Okay, so basically it's saying that, let's say that we take a 6% listing. Okay, I have the listing, I take a 6% listing. If I buy, if Alex brings me a buyer, I'll take 3%, I'll give him a 3%. Okay, 3%, I'll take 3%. That makes sense, right? Okay, now she's my buyer. I'm the listing agent. She comes to me and says, I want to buy the property. She submits an offer. Okay. I now am going to get 3% and the seller is going to get 3% because I represent her. If he brings the buyer, I have to give him 3%. That's what the dual agency is. Now, do you have to do that? No. So I could represent her and take 6%, or I can have him and I can take 3 and give him 3. Does that make sense? So if you,
Somebody is representing themselves.
Hmm?
If somebody is representing themselves.
that's what the dual rate means. There could be a change if there's not a BAC paid out, the commission could change. That's what dual rate is. So it's for us, if we see it on the MLS, it just means that they could have an advantage over your offer when you're submitting an offer if they're representing. So what I would do if I did that, if I saw a yes checked on the MLS, I would ask them, are any of the offers being presented your clients? And then that will tell me whether or not I'm going to lose out on that. Okay. Gross net. Does everybody know what gross and net means? Okay. If closing costs are in the offer and you put net, you're not getting your commission off of those closing costs. If you have gross, you can get commission off the closing costs. Make sense? Okay, that's it on this, unless there's a question about any of those other sections.
Yeah, what was the last thing you were talking about?
Yeah.
We were writing a note over here.
Yep, gross versus net listing. Okay, a gross listing is off of, so let's say I buy a home for 600,000. My commission is off of 600,000. Now, if I have a net listing and I have a $600,000 offer and $10,000 seller concessions to the buyer, my offer really, my commission is off of 590 because it's the bottom line net to the seller that the commission is off of. If you check gross, it's the bottom line, it's this the number that comes in. Make sense?
Nest listings were like illegal in Utah, and that was a situation of like, hey, I can sell my house, I need to walk away with 300,000. If you sell it for, sell it for whatever you want,
Mhm.
you can keep anything else, and that's illegal in Utah, right? It's what
Yeah, but that's not called a net listing. It's called what is that called? You that have been in school.
I remembered it.
It's at school.
I thought it was called a net listing.
I know.
I remember being
It's
at
not a
like a
net
net
listing.
sale or
It's something well, maybe they call it a net listing, but this is
I know California.
it's basically off of what they're saying, what's illegal is you can't say, whatever I get on this is your commission. If you get over this, you can have all the rest. So I want to net $300,000 and I take in an offer for 400,000, I get 100,000.
Yeah.
That's what we can't do. What this is saying is whatever they're getting, that's where the percentage comes from. So, make sense?
On the listing type, you said Century 21 doesn't do the E.
EAL.
Okay.
We do the ERS, which is what we spent 90% of the classes today on. Okay, any questions on the back on the remarks, agent remarks, exclusion remarks, HOA remarks? Okay, all right. Let's see here. Okay. Seller's disclosures, the next 6 pages. Just want to point out right in the middle. Buyer is advised not to rely on the company or any agents of the company for determination regarding the physical or legal condition of the property. That's once again,
Where you at?
the seller's property condition.
Notice from company, the first box.
First row. Okay, it's just it's the bolded. I'm going to read the 2 bolded sections. And really, this is the only things that I do with when I'm presenting the seller's disclosures, is I'll just say, you know what, if you have any questions, you can seek legal, right? And then instructions to sellers. I read this one. Seller is obligated under law, regardless of occupancy, to disclose to the buyers defects in the property and the facts known to the seller that materially and adversely affect the use and value of the property that cannot be discovered by a reasonable inspection by an ordinary prudent buyer. Okay. And I just let them know that. I say, just disclose it. And then the way that I handle it with any of my sellers, they say, well, what about this? Should I disclose this? Anytime somebody says, should I disclose it? You should. Just disclose it. It's going to be better off for you. It's going to be better off for everybody if you can just get it disclosed. And then I talk to my buyers when they sign this. I say the very last page, it says, acknowledgement of receipt by buyer. So I just tell my buyers, you're signing this, not saying you agree with it, you're saying you received it. That's all you're saying here. It's the last page, 7 of 7. It's where the buyer signs, acknowledgement of receipt. All the buyer is doing is saying they received it. So you go through it and they're like, oh, I don't like those seller disclosures. Oh, they didn't fill them out correctly. Oh, they didn't disclose things I saw on the property. They're not correct. What they're signing is that they received this, not that they agree with it. Make sense? Okay, so those are 3 documents that we use. Now let's say there's a problem during the transaction and in the house and we have to redisclose. There's this addendum. Looks like this, next page. It says seller's property condition disclosure. And what you do is you write down the page number from the seller's disclosures, item number, whatever it is, and then an explanation of it. Okay. We just received an offer this morning that has a seller's disclosures attached to it. And they wrote the explanations right here on the C notes here on page 6. Actually, no, it was page 7 at the very bottom. They're right here. So they're all listed right there. Just use this addendum. Put them right in there. Make it nice and fancy. And any questions on the addendum?
So sorry, is the addendum just to add stuff in or to make it more clear?
So if there's not enough room in, so there is a line. If there's not enough room, I would put it on the addendum. If there is room and you've written it there, and then you have something new come up, okay? Anytime something new comes up, or let's say that they didn't check, they missed heating or 8, 9, and 10. They skipped it. They forgot to check anything there, and we're having to addend those. We would do that on this, not this. Okay, so we wouldn't be like, oh, well, let me just send it to you again. Now, if the buyer hasn't seen it and they haven't signed it, you can send them the contract again and say, just sign, finish filling it out. But then once it's sent to the buyer, then you're using this form to update it. And then they're just signing, they're acknowledging it as well. Okay. Okay, I think we only have a couple more. Wire fraud alert disclosure. Never trust wire instructions sent via email. That's in bold letters and underlined, and it's orange on my paper. Okay. Okay, so this is when I remember, and I told you that there was an agent this last month that got dinged for $85,000. And in court that they I was telling you that I'm going to tell you the story. Okay, so what happened was buyer's agent represented their buyer, and they went to closing. They had $85,000 they were wiring to the title company. The agent got an email from the wire instructions and sent the wire instructions to their buyer. And then the buyer sent the money, and that email was fraudulent. So they sent $85,000 out. Okay. So the problem and what the courts found was that the agent didn't do their due diligence, and they should not have forwarded that email. So my suggestion is right here: never trust wire instructions sent by email, and just tell your clients, it doesn't matter if it comes from me, it doesn't matter if it comes from a title company. If it comes by email, do not use it. Because what they're getting really, really smart on this scam, that they are now using your email, the title company's email, and the company's stuff. So it legitimately looks like it's coming from you, and it's saying things like, you know, here is this, the wiring instructions. Make sure you don't forward this to anybody. This is only for you. And it looks legitimate, that it's a good wiring instruction. The title companies will never send an email anymore. They used to, but this particular agent did, and the buyer sued the agent, and the courts ruled in favor of the seller or the buyer. And that agent now is on the hook for $85,000. Now the problem, the reason I bring this up is in law, when a case is won, what happens if another situation happens somewhere else in the country?
They're gonna go off the case, that other case.
They're going to go off of that case. They're going to say, this person won, and this is their ruling. We're taking it to court here. And then the judge is going to look at it and say, yep, that's what they said. I agree with it. And then you lose. Okay. So This is a really big one, and we think that people don't fall for it. But in, this was last year in Union Park, there was a buyer who was an attorney who signed this form, who did everything, and we talked about through the whole thing, and wired $50,000. And luckily, we caught it before it did the second transfer, and so they were able to pull the money back. But this was like an attorney, and he knew this stuff, and we had him sign it, and he still sent it.
Also talk about fraud is, I mean, I don't know if people are still getting it, but there's like a number and it takes you, hey, this is George Morris, or I literally am one
Yeah.
right now. It's like, hey, this is Dave Parker. I need you to go to Walmart and find me a bunch of
Yes.
cards. So,
And I thought that one was an obvious one too, but we had an agent in this office here
Wow.
who went to Target and was in the checkout line buying the cards, and I was shocked. She didn't go through with it because she's like, oh, let me call the agent again. But you think that it's not, but they're getting, I don't know.
George says jump, we jump.
Well, the problem is they're now starting to use everybody in the office. Like you're
Yeah.
like Jeremy, I've seen it with Jeremy's. I've now seen it with Dave.
They did
yeah.
it with Amy, and I'm on Amy's team.
Yeah, you do with
They sent it
Amy.
To me at 5:30 in the morning, so I was like, not quite awake.
Yeah.
Like, Amy, want me to do this?
So my office, we have in Orem, we have a smaller office, and we're on a group text thread, and every once in a while we'll get a big long. We'll try to see who can last the longest without like getting them messing with them. And we've got some pretty good ones where we've been able to mess with them for quite a while. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's the only thing I wanted to thing on the wire discuss.
So how does a title company normally give the wire instructions? Paper? Like
Paper.
they're gonna
You'll-
deliver a paper to me and then I deliver that to the client?
I wouldn't even have it delivered to me. I personally would take myself out of the equation at all. And I would say, you either need to go to the title, if you're gonna wire it before, here's the title company's address, go to the title company and get it from the title
Pick it up
company
in
in person, or when we close, they'll give you the instructions. You take that instructions, it never changes, go wire it. So that's how I would do it. I personally, as an agent, I just try to eliminate any time that I can be liable for something. For example, like inspections. Some agents really like to go to inspections. I don't like going to inspections because I'm not the one they're paying for the inspection. So I want them to ask the inspector questions. I don't want them to ask me, oh, do you think this is a good idea or not? I just try to eliminate any potential problems that I could create by me saying anything, really. You know, there was on that line, there was a lawsuit in California where the home was over by the ocean and the buyer's agent was showing the home and it was a smell. It was kind of stinky that day. And the client said, you know, oh, what's that smell? And the agent said, it smells like the sea. It smells like the ocean it really stinks. Well, what happened was there was a sewage problem in that house. They bought the home and they turned around and they sued the agent for telling them it was the sea and not the sewage. So you just have to be really careful with, this is what I know and this is what I don't know. Okay. Affiliate business. We got 2 minutes. We're gonna go through this really quick. Affiliate business. Okay, so this comes about because of the new, where a real estate company can now own a title company and they can own portions of a financial company. So the Inspiro. So in this particular case, Century 21 has some ownership in Inspiro and they have some ownership in North Star Title. Because we have those ownerships, regardless if you use them or not, your client has to acknowledge that those services are here. So this is not saying they have to use them. It's just saying that they are aware of it. If they are using it, then it's definitely important for them to be aware of it. But if they're not using them, then it's just, and as you can see, I mean, they put a range there. So it should fall in with any of your, if you're using another financial institution, you know, another lender that's not ours, like some of the hesitation I get from agents is, well, I don't want them to see this because then they're going to think that we're, you know, they, instead of using my guy, they're gonna try to use somebody else. And the reality is we have to still disclose it. Okay. Last one, lead-based paint. When is lead-based paint required? 1978. Prior to 1978, you have to disclose it, regardless of whether they have it or not. And then your seller has to fill this out. It really should be filled out before you get an offer, so you can submit it with the offer, so the buyer can acknowledge that they received that. So as the listing agent, you're the one acknowledging it right here. Agent has informed seller of seller's obligation. This is not the buyer's agent, this is the seller's agent. So the seller should be submitting this to the buyer should sign it and send it back to you, not the other way around.
Wait, say that again.
The seller should be submitting this to the buyer, not the buyer giving it back to the seller. Okay, so they're initiating this. So they're disclosing it, the buyer's acknowledging the disclosure. What I see is the buyer acknowledges the disclosure before the disclosure was made. So what I do is I fill it out, I have my seller fill it out, and then on the MLS where you can attach documents. You know how you can do that?
Found that out the other day. Yeah, you just click the green. attach
Yep.
document.
And then you can put whatever you want in there. You can put all your stuff, all the information. So if you have HOA documents or anything, or any, like I've seen ones where they got a new roof and there's a warranty, they just attach that document so people can see it. Okay. All right, hopefully that was helpful. Now go out and take listings.
Thank you.
And there's the sign in. You don't want to have to take this class again, I promise you. No. It's right over here.
What was your name?
Jason. Yep.
So can we just tell him, hey, Jason told me so,
In what?
whatever.
Whatever, get out of that?
Yeah.
Anything regarding listings.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why, there's a reason why Russ likes to go out of town when this class comes up, because it's just reading through contracts. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for doing it.
Yeah.
So I have a deal that's going south. Well, it's gone south. I can't get calls with my buyer as a buyer. A new lender, not Brandon, who I usually just gave me this deal, so I gave it back to him.
Sure.
He was trying to do
I know we
a
went to
fraudulent
lunch
deal.
at ISS.
And refi a primary residence and buy a primary residence cemetery.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My buyer had no idea. So now we have to.
I know,
Yeah.
when we met, like, we were split, so you were
We were
already
supposed to
there.
close. Right.
That was with like April and June.
Can my buyer go
He
after the
wasn't
lender
at lunch.
Yeah.
Okay. for that money?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm trying to
lenders
remember, was
are
it
not
Matthew?
regulated like
Was that
real
his
estate
name?
agents,
Came
like
to
they don't
lunch
have a
and
code of
helped you?
ethics and stuff where,
Oh,
whereas if we
He
screw
was
up
the
as
only guy, I
agents,
was like, he's the lone man.
the client can go to the board and file a complaint. There isn't a complaint on the mortgage
It's hard.
side. So in order to really pursue it, it's like legal action against them.
Yeah.
That's how you're doing it. So it's
under 5,000.
gonna cost him that to do it. I mean, I would still have him file a complaint with the city on it, or the state.
Okay.
But it's not like the MLS, or not the MLS, our board, who can come after us and say, hey, you broke these rules.
Yeah. Okay.
Your license is now suspended and we're fining you.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, they don't have that for the mortgage side.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Megan said she signed everything, but I need you to check and make sure everything is as it should be. Because even what she asked me is, she said, what constitutes the purchase contract and when does that come along in this process? And so I just told her the
Just 1 second, let me try to figure this out
Okay.
before we talk about that. 'Cause I'm trying to get. Somebody asked to move the document down.
Oh, before you did.
Not asleep, not asleep. Word echo happening. On paper unmuted. Could it be recorded? Yes. Word, it's echoing. Yes, better. Please. Trust it. No reminder. Okay. It'd be better if somebody monitored this.